Hi, I'm Nancy Bell from Oshkosh Public Library, and this is Book Buzz, where I'll take one book that's recently been getting a lot of buzz on bestsellers lists, review sites, or social media. I'll break it down into definable elements, and then I'll suggest 3 books that have similar themes, writing styles, characters, and overall general vibes. This month I really wanted to talk about a book that I think will have some longevity in the scope of literature. So Geraldine Brooks is a Pulitzer Prize winning author, and she often uses her writing to explore the truth of human experience through what at their core are fictional novels. Her latest book, Horse, is another meticulously researched book that immerses us into 3 different time periods, revealing the true story of the thoroughbred horse Lexington and the previously unseen people involved in his story. So it takes us to 2019, not too long ago, where a Smithsonian scientist and an art historian are unexpectedly studying the same subject material, although for very different reasons. So there's Jess, who is studying a stallion's bones for a scientific inquiry surrounding his physical attributes. How did he become such a champion? And then there's Theo, who saves a horse painting from being destroyed, basically, or thrown out. And he starts delving into the story of the artist. And it's revealing instead, the history of the horse himself, as well as that of black horsemen in the history of the United States. And so that actually takes us back to 1850 with the enslaved groom named Jarrett, who is bonded with a bay foal. And he's finally, gotten enough money to buy his own freedom, but not his son's. And then there's the eruption of the Civil War, and the artist who paints racehorses turns out to fight for the Union. And then we zoom ahead to 1954, where a gallery owner takes a risk on an oil painting of a horse, which itself is kind of a mystery. So all of these voices and stories throughout these decades are weaving together a singular story about the horse Lexington, as well as the black horsemen who are the true reason for the horse's success. So the elements I'm going to be looking for in a read-alike, so it's historical fiction inspired by real events. It doesn't necessarily have to match that exactly, but some kind of historical fiction elements, some kind of truth to a story. I'll also be looking for a sweeping saga, something that goes further than just a 1, 2, 3 year period. I'm going to be looking for decades long stories. I really want complex characters, and if I can get culturally diverse, I would love to get into some of that. Also really character driven plots. I want these stories to be more involved in the internal workings of the characters themselves, as opposed to reactionary to things that are happening in the world. If it's an intricate plot with some time jumps, that would be great. And I would also love for them to be a little bit thought-provoking in the issues that they bring up. In Horse, she's talking about racism and the prevalence throughout American history, especially with how we still don't know the story of those black horsemen to this day, and she's trying to bring that to light. So if we could get some elements of thought-provoking issues at hand, that would be fantastic. So let's keep an eye out for those elements as I talk about my read-alikes. So for this read-alike, I really tried to focus on that sweeping story that goes across decades and generations. So this book is French Braid by Anne Tyler. We first meet the Garrett family. So it's Robin and Mercy, and then there are 3 kids, Lily, Alice, and David. And we meet them during a 1959 summer vacation where the family is already seemingly disconnected from one another. Tyler then takes us chapter by chapter into the perspectives of each family member, and she starts to add on the next generation of voices as well. And it goes over a span of 60 years. And so we're following these people grow up, go through marriage, divorce, deaths, but she really links all of it through these invisible ties that bind together the modern American family. So even if, families don't talk about what's actually on our minds, many of the family realities are internally acknowledged through their perspectives, but never discussed outright in the family. So let's go ahead and take a look at the elements for why I think that this is a solid read-alike recommendation when we compare it to Horse. So again, both of these books have that sweeping narrative that go through decades, but they also have that, that simultaneous single unifying thread at the center of the book. In Horse, it's really talking about, that overlay of racism and that story, whereas this one is looking at the issues of the modern American family. It's really richly detailed and beautifully written. Again, Horse is meticulously researched. The amount of detail that's in that book and is in this one are also very good. Complex characters, like the characters feel so real, just like how our family members do some things that drive us crazy. The characters in here do it as well. And it also has a large cast of characters similar to Horse. There are so many characters that even if they're just like a small side character, they do have a little bit of a voice and they put an extra something into here. And yeah, I touched on it a little bit before, but it is a little bit, issue focused and thought provoking, because while Horse explores the issue of racism, French Braid is really identifying the domestic issues of the modern American family. So although these aren't like spot on similar themes, I think that the elements are close enough that if you like Horse, you can also appreciate French Braid. This book is a little bit more spot on with its themes, as well as all of its elements. So there's themes of like facing racism, there's like a web of connections, as well as parallel narratives, and it does very much go into enslaved people, racism, and slavery. So this is A Shout in the Ruins by Kevin Powers. It's this very sweeping, dramatic novel that spans over 100 years. It's set in Virginia during the Civil War, and it really explores, the brutal legacy of violence in American society, examining the fates and inhabitants of a plantation and their descendants. So it starts, I believe, 120 years ago, and it's really exploring the ongoing effects of the Civil War specifically. It alternates chapters between the Civil War as well as like the mid-20th century, and so it really goes between like this family and their descendants throughout time, and there's like a love story, and there's the connections between the generations. There's so much that goes on in this book that I can't even really think about how to best succinctly summarize it beyond it's the story of, descendants and racism throughout a span of 120 years. So let's go ahead and talk about the very specific elements that I think makes it almost like a spot-on read-alike. So like almost so spot on that if you enjoy Horse, maybe give yourself a little break before you start reading this one again. For example, it's a sweeping saga of time, and it almost falls in the same time periods that you see in Horse. Like you're going through the Civil War almost up to present day. This one is a little bit more of a family saga. We're following one family and their descendants, as opposed to Horse, where we're really linked by the horse itself, and we're getting like these spin-off stories. This is one family continuously through time. But because it does span 120 years, we have that large cast of characters, and as families always are, like I said before, super complex characters who are all connected. And it's told through this way of multiple perspectives where you're getting little snippets from everyone involved. It is really leisurely paced. It's not a huge page turner. It's more of like a family history that's really intense. But because it's done that way, it's a really moving story that I think you can also appreciate if you liked Horse by Geraldine Brooks. So for those reasons, I think that these are really good read-alikes for each other. So kind of in between, the sweeping saga and spot-on intensity of the Civil War, we have another book that's inspired by real events and real people. This is The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict. So this story is the real story of Belle DaCosta Green, who is hired by J.P. Morgan to curate a collection of rare manuscripts, books, artwork for his newly built Pierpont Morgan Library. And she becomes one of the most powerful women in New York during this time period because of the power he instills in her, really believing in her capabilities as a librarian. Unfortunately, she hides a big secret. She was actually born Belle Marion Greener, the daughter of Richard Greener, who was the first Black graduate of Harvard. But because she's so pale-skinned, she's passing as white. And so this is her story about how she's hiding this big secret, but is also a big face in society at the same time, and how she has to kind of reckon with herself and with her family through this time period. So let's go ahead and name the specific elements that I think make it a good read-alike if you enjoyed horse. So I think that this is, it's historical fiction, although it's more based on fiction than the historical facts. It's been expounded upon, but that's fine. I think that historical fiction of all kinds is, something is made up in order to make it more entertaining, if anything. We have a big theme of facing racism throughout history. We have that again. We have complex, culturally diverse characters. Our girl Belle is an African-American woman who is hiding it from, society at large, but also kind of hiding herself from her own family. Can you get more complex than that? It's really character-driven. Although she's kind of reacting to the society that she's been born in, she still is making all these choices about her life, and that's the thing that's driving the story. It does also have an intricate plot because we're following these, not clues, but we're following, her real life and like these threads that she left behind in her scant writings. And so to piece that together to tell a story, it's more intricately plotted than you would think it normally would be. It's also really descriptive and richly detailed. The setting is such an interesting, beautiful part of history that it really comes alive on the page when Marie Benedict is writing about it. And so for those reasons, I think that even though this isn't as historically accurate as, we would really love to see, I think that for the themes that it represents, it's a really good read-alike if you enjoyed Horse by Geraldine Brooks. And those are the 3 read-alikes I have for you today. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the library's YouTube channel for more content. If you have any suggestions or questions, please go ahead and leave a comment. Or you can always get a hold of me at the library reference desk, which I'll leave a link to down below. Thanks so much for watching, and let's get back to reading.